to the Days Adventure podcast. I'm your host, David Visser, and today is a special day because I've got my brother here with me. Hey, Danny.
Everyone. How's it going?
Excellent. Thanks for coming on board today. Danny has helped me with research, has been my cheerleader.
That is true.
I guess one of the first questions that I really want to ask you is, what was your first impression when you heard that first episode to the fifth?
If I can, I'd kind of like to start by when I found out that you had all of these journal entries from Grandpa.
Yeah,
I was
please.
and I know that's kind of jumping back a little bit, but hearing and understanding what was all involved in that and what was said on that stuff and everything that you did to kind of work towards translating that all, I had no idea those existed, and I was absolutely gobsmacked because when you
Really?
try to, I did not know they existed until you told me about them. So for me, hearing that, and you showing me, I was like, what? Wow. Because I always thought when we met Grandpa, as you know, when we were little, and we would ask him about stuff about the war, nothing much was said. Everything was said pretty much in those journals, right?
Yeah. Well, there were certain things that, when we look back, I think our grandfather made hints. He didn't go into great detail.
Exactly.
He didn't go into great detail. What he did is more like it was this story and what kind of happened after. And that was it.
Yeah. Short snippets of things.
Correct.
So to answer your question, I am absolutely ecstatic to see where this goes, because hearing the first episodes, I can't wait for the next one to come out. I've actually listened to them multiple times.
Oh, Dan.
Well, and the reason why, because there's so much information in them that you're like, I didn't know that. And then you kind of fact check it, not to fact check you.
No.
To go,
Hey, I hope people do.
I had no idea that even happened.
Mm.
And I've considered myself a person that was really keen on World War II history because it interested me. Like anything I could get my hands on, like videos, movies, books. Like I enjoyed that kind of stuff because I felt it very interesting. But anyways, yeah, I'm really excited as to see where this ends up. And
wow,
far, no, it's awesome. It's awesome stuff. Keep up the awesome work, because
thanks,
these
Danny.
stories need,
appreciate it.
But the stories need to be told.
I agree.
So
It definitely has to be, told. So I'm going to go into another part of this before we get to talking about our grandfather, because I think that is going to be a very important part of this conversation. Actually, I'm going to go back a little bit from your very first that you made, is that you didn't even know that this thing existed.
I did not.
So it was actually given to me by Sid and Toby on the funeral of our grandmother. That's when I first got this booklet right here. That's when I got that. So that was quite some time ago, as you know.
Yep.
So when I called you up, because I think you were the very first person that I called, other than Brenda, who was there in real time as I was, getting this put together and understanding what I had. Did it surprise you? Like some of the things that we were, because I was sharing some of the information that I was getting.
No, it didn't surprise me, so to speak. I was surprised that something like this existed, but it didn't surprise me what kind of things were in it, because we have history of other people that were in the same sort of situations. When we look back, there's other Dutch families that have come forward with stories about their family members being hiding or being part of maybe a network of helping each other survive through this war. I guess knowing that and knowing that you had these journals and the things that you were revealing to me that were in them. So no, I wasn't surprised, but I was surprised that the journals actually existed to begin with, because I had no idea. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And actually, Danny, I got to say that with your enthusiasm when I first started talking to you about it, and your interest and your curiosity and all that kind of stuff, it actually helped me keep going. Because this has been a 2-year process, as you know. One of my biggest disappointments, though, I'm going to be blunt on this, is how some of the rest of our family, like specifically our aunts and uncles, right, is how uncurious they were about this. Did that surprise you?
Yes and no.
Okay.
And that's a twofold answer, because I don't know my aunts and uncles super well anymore. Like, I was in my 20s when I left, and I'm now 50. So that's 30 years ago that I've really had a lot of interaction with them. So yes, I was surprised because it's their father's story. So I was like, why wouldn't you be curious, and why wouldn't you want to know that? As obviously we both know that 2 of our family members, our father being one of them, being the oldest, was born in Holland.
Yeah,
Before they even...
you and I are actually first generation Canadian.
Absolutely. And our Aunt Kobe, who is our dad's sister. Anyways, I would think if anybody was super curious about it all, maybe more so than anybody, would be those 2. But anyway, for me, it was yes because of that, and no because of they're not very history oriented. I think they live in their world, and that's what it makes them happy. The history of the world and history of how we became about, or where we're from, or we came from Holland and now we live in Canada and let's move forward is their mindset. And I can't begrudge them for not wanting to know, but I was kind of surprised that they wouldn't be like, this is awesome, keep going, I want to know.
Yeah. See, and I think that's the part that was the most disappointing, was
Yes.
that part right there. It wasn't that. Now, and you and I talked about this before we started this podcast, and I'm going to be blunt about this. When I first started going through this, I didn't know what side our grandfather was on, especially once I started digging down, right, and trying to figure out what these words actually meant, what the historical context, the time periods, things like that. I didn't know. So I was wondering that maybe that they were afraid of maybe opening up a Pandora's box per se.
Mm-hmm.
That could have been it, but I would have still thought that they would have been, hey, yeah, let's figure this out. Let's think about this. Let's look at this. Hey, let's all work together, because I really thought it would have been more of a family affair. You know what I mean? Like something where we could all come together. We could reconnect with each other. We could maybe learn a little bit about each other, because we're so separated out and like you said, in different worlds. We're all in different worlds, but it's always good to connect and understand each other and learn from each other, right? So yeah, I guess I was a little bit disappointed in that aspect. Was I overly surprised in the end? Probably not, except for the curiosity part. I know you're like this too. I'm curious. I want to know. I want to learn and understand.
I guess that comes to, how can you not be when you have the information that was gifted to you? How could you not?
Right.
To me, how could you not? And that's, again, I guess that's the difference between us and our family, is they don't need to know, and we want to know.
Yes. Yeah. And we're curious and we want to figure it out. Maybe the audience doesn't know this. We were brought up in our grandfather and grandmother's home. We know all the Dutch stuff. We were immersed in it like a lot of our other family, right? But it was more cultural, playing crokinole and walnuts, our Christmases and things like that. We're all very Dutch, right? The food was Dutch. So we were very immersed into it. Yeah, it is kind of interesting of the things that we carry forward. And then also once you start going back in history and you start to learning why these things happen and why they have this culture that they came with to Canada with.
Well, as you know, Grandpa was very self-efficient and self-sufficient because he believed in raising his own meat. He believed in raising his own fruits or vegetables and berries.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was harder to grow fruit, so to speak, like oranges or lemons or limes or anything like that. But
we
it
had
was
plums,
always
peaches,
yeah.
apples.
We had gooseberries, currants, raspberries, strawberries.
Yeah.
We had all of those blackberries. We had all of those things. And I mean, it was because of how he grew up. And probably a lot of it had to do with going through World War II.
Yes.
Hey, I can't rely on anything or anybody but me. And I'm going to provide for my family, and I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to build a kind of a self-sustained little hobby farm and in the middle of the city.
Right.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
One thing, like when I tell my wife about my grandfather, right, is I truly believe if he would have had the education that is available in today's world, he would have been an engineer. Like,
I no doubt about it. I think I agree with you.
Man could tear something apart and put it back together. He could do woodwork. He could do mechanicals. He just had that brain. It was incredible. And he was also an avid reader, right? Like he read a lot.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he was dedicated to reading that newspaper daily. But I did see him read other texts, right? But I remember the paper was his thing. Like, that's how he taught Grandma how to read.
Was it? I didn't know that.
Yeah, like
what was in the newspaper?
Grandpa taught Grandma how to read. I remember Grandma telling me that.
Wow. See, look, I just learned something new on this podcast.
And Grandpa learned a lot how to read from reading the newspaper.
Yes, that makes sense. That makes sense. Here's something that
English, I should say English.
English. Yes.
Yeah.
He could definitely read and write Dutch. Absolutely. And so could our grandmother. Absolutely.
Yeah. They were both very literate, just English. Yeah.
So this kind of brings me to this next section because in today's world, right? You know, people have trouble talking politics, talking religion, things like that. But one thing that I do look back at as we were growing up around our kitchen table, because we always had meals together, there was almost every night we had dinner, right? With the family all
It was
sitting
almost a must.
Yeah.
It was a must.
It was a must.
That was family time.
Right. But I always remember we did talk about religion. We did talk about politics around these tables. Like whether we were just we didn't understand what was going on. But I think I attribute my ability to talk politics and talk religion from my grandfather. Because the way he would communicate or the way now, would I agree with everything that was going on versus at that time versus now? We would probably have different opinions, but I still think he would have been a woke person in today's world because he was very loving, very caring. It was about the community. It wasn't about individuality, right? It was about the family and helping others. Very loving person. But I think he taught me how to talk about religion and politics and not make it an identity, but as having a conversation.
Right. Again, and just to go back a teeny bit, Grandpa was a very loving person, but Grandpa was a very not outward loving person. He
wasn't affectionate. He wasn't overly affectionate.
Well, yeah, he wasn't overly affectionate, but you knew things affected him. And I thought he was a Superman. He was invincible. But I did. I never saw the man cry. I never saw the man scared. I never saw the man overly show a type of an emotion other than maybe I've seen him mad at you.
I was just going to say, his grandchildren probably tested his patience a few times.
Right. But I did see him laugh and smile a lot and joke.
Oh my goodness, he was a funny man.
Very
He was
funny.
a funny man.
He was.
He had dry humor, and he loved joking around. He loved joking around. You could tell.
Yeah, and he
Like,
loved
everything from
teasing.
stone-put ice cream to
Yeah. And he loved teasing Granny, like in a nice
my
way. It
goodness.
wasn't
Yeah. Oh no, it was
malicious or
beautiful.
mean.
Yeah, no, it
Yeah,
was loving. Definitely.
Yeah, it was always, he'd always give her a little rib on something, right? Like just
Yeah.
because he knew how to kind of touch her buttons, I guess.
Yeah, and get her going.
Yeah. Especially about dinners, right? One of my favorite things is remembering Grandma going, well, then just make your own meal, and then slamming shit down and going, I'm done. You make it yourself. And Grandpa would just be smirking like, yeah, I did that. I pushed the button. Yeah.
They were really good together. They were definitely
they were each
definitely
other's
in
zing.
love. Oh yeah. They
Oh,
were
yeah.
definitely, they were each other's people.
They were very passionate about each other, and they were very,
yes,
they loved each other so much, and it showed right to the end. Like,
yep,
I wasn't
agree.
there at the end, but I knew, like, when I went to visit Grandma for the last time, and she remembered me, like, all she ever would say is, I miss Grandpa. I just I miss my Freddie. I miss my Freddie.
Mm-hmm.
And she yearned for him, right? After he passed away. And that just there in my heart was like, wow, like this love is unbreakable. These two people spent so much time and worked so hard to raise so many children in a loving home. And
sacrifice.
Sacrifice so much.
That's
much.
something that we don't see today in the same kind of way, is that they did without in order to go forward. And I try to live my life that way still. It's like, hey, and if it's not that important, it's about the memories. It's about sustainability.
And they were incredible. Both of them. Both.
All right. Hey, we still got a lot to cover.
Yep. Okay, let's get to it.
What I want to cover is some of the research. What are some of the things you looked up? Because I'm going to be blunt with this, is that's what I want people to do. Is I actually don't want them to just hear what I'm saying, the research that I've done and put together, that I want them to actually look at it themselves and see how it was back then and how blessed we are to be living in this period of time because of the things that happen.
Right. I guess for me, first of all, would be a lot of the information that you've gleaned from your research and from kind of looking things up myself. And I think fact checking is something that I agree with you that people should do, because it also helps educate them on everything. And that's what I kind of did. Like, there's certain little things, like when you brought up certain situations, I would go, I never knew that. So then I would look it up and I'd be like, well, Al B, look at that. I didn't even know that name even existed. Like, that's strange, but cool. I have a question for you, if you don't mind. Why did you start in 1937 and not from when the actual journals began? What made you want to go that far back? Because the journals start in what? Please remind me, I don't remember.
43.
Right. But you went all the way back to 1937. And what brought you to there? Why that starting point?
So one of the things when I started to go through this, like, the journals themselves are packed full of information. And the more I dig into it, the more research that I do, the more translation that I get out of it, and understanding what it all really means is a pack. But what I wanted to do, I guess, with this podcast is, because of today's world, how important democracy is, how fragile it can actually be. Understanding that it's not just one day Hitler came along and, started putting Jews into concentration camps and taking over the world. It didn't happen in one day. The significance of 1937 was the last democratic election that the Netherlands had. And one of the things I think I did point out in the first episode is that in 1930, I believe it was 1933 or 1934, the NSB, which was the Dutch Nazi Party, was starting to gain more votes. They had over 8% of votes in that very first time that they were an actual party, right? The NSB. So I wanted to kind of start there, is that the Dutch at that time were rejecting the Nazis because they had way less support by the time of 1937. So I even see that a little bit here in Canada, right? I saw in Canada, after our pandemic and stuff like that, a lot of these right-wing groups started to get hold, like the People's Party of Canada, right? Like that party was very similar to the NSB in how they thought, right? They thought about, only our people are the most important, let's get rid of diversity. This is the way that we should live, this way, and we shouldn't think of anything else, and we should always stay within ourselves, right? Like only produce our own stuff that we only need, right? So that is why I started with 1937, because I thought it was a pivotal point to show that the Netherlands was actually quite divergent from Germany at that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So you kind of
So
just
were you
wanted
surprised
to show
that
the
I started
build-up
there?
Yeah, because and the reason why I think that most history, a lot of people know why the World War II started. And maybe I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people understand the complex situation that happened in Europe during that time.
And it was complex.
The complexity was enormous, really. But I think a lot of people had an understanding as to how. And the reason why I ask is, why did you go to 1937 specifically? You answered that question is because that was the last democratic election that the
Before the
Netherlands
invasion.
had. So that makes sense. And I think that's great.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. I wasn't sure where to start when I started the podcast, but that's where I thought was a good starting point.
Yeah. No, that makes 100% sense.
Yeah, and it kind of brings the story from the beginning to and this story is going to end in 1947. So just for our audience, even though after, I believe the last date on there is like in the fall of 45, but our grandfather actually wrote more notes in 1946 and 1947 when he says that the first time he ever sees the ocean is in 1947, when he took our grandmother to see the ocean. Now, the writing is significantly different, right? It's not in this more coded version that we see that we're coming into now as in episode 4 and episode 5. It is more free flowing.
Right.
So you can, and as we get going, we'll probably understand how much different the conversation was.
So in saying all that, I'm going to put that question back to you. What jumped out at you from the start when you started this research?
So from the very first day, from that New Year's Day, when I started to actually get the result from ChatGPT of the original raw translations, just from Dutch to English, there was a story there. You could tell that our grandfather was in great distress, that there was survival there. And I put myself in his shoes because he was he was like 20 years old, 20, 21 years old. I think back when I was 20, 21 years old, right? There was
I think he was younger than that when the war started, no?
he was 17. He was
17.
17 when it started. It was around, so he was around 20, 21 years old when he started really writing this information. So between 19 and 21, roughly, right? So, and I thought back is that his whole world was turned upside down. He was going from, coming out of school, learning obviously about the land, how to be a gardener, putting things together, all these kinds of things. And then his world just turned upside down. And you can hear the fear when he talks about, you can almost see that he kind of goes into this out of body experience when he starts talking about watching people getting shot or people getting rounded up. How he talks about the Germans versus the Tommies, which were the Allies. And even he mentions Canadians. So maybe that's the reason he came to Canada instead of the United States, right? So those things kind of jumped out at me right away. This is history. He's watching history that we just learned in textbooks, basically.
Yep. Awesome.
How about you? What jumped out at you the most?
I tried to put myself in that situation, and I will never be able. Well, I shouldn't say that. I hope I never ever have to be in his situation ever.
What are you saying? Are you the Americans coming our way? Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I don't even want to go there on this one right now, but
yeah, I know.
That's a whole different conversation. But for me, I was emotional. I was very emotional.
Yes, me too.
And I'm probably going to get a little bit emotional talking about it right now. Like, I try to put myself as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 20-year-old living through that and the horrors of what the man had to experience, not only verbally, but visually.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of it probably he didn't see firsthand, but there is a lot that he did.
Well, there is. Actually, there is. There's a lot that he's seen firsthand.
Also, a lot of what he heard, right? From people witnessing things that he probably cared about and loved. Like friends, family, his own siblings, right? Like,
well, and just to add to that, and also you can tell that there are some names in there that he was very close to, but then there's other people that he knew very well that he had to hide from, that he couldn't actually
trust,
right? And that's
quite
scary startling
too. And scary,
right?
Like one minute
came a lot. There's a lot of times that people were looking for him.
Yeah. And it's scary when the people that you thought you could trust are the ones that will throw you under the bus in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So for me, what jumped out at me the most is how emotionally I was invested, even though I was pretty separated from it because you were the one doing a lot of the work, right? So, but when I first read those initial translations, my heart was sad thinking about my grandfather went through one of the worst things that the world has ever seen, still to this day.
Yep.
And he was there on the ground, witnessing it with his eyes, with his ears, and every sense of his body. And it just, the smells, I was thinking to myself, what would that smell like? Like seeing rotting horses on the side of the road or dead bodies or, smelling the
diesel.
artillery, the diesel, the artillery. It just, so much
the
hit
gunpowder.
Exactly. The ammunitions, right? Like it just, I was like, my goodness, like that man, no wonder why he didn't want to really talk about it. Like that's a bad place to go back to mentally, emotionally,
And as kids, we didn't even realize that, right? Like for us,
because we didn't understand.
Yeah. I wish he was here today because I'd definitely be going through this line by line and asking him so many things and stuff like that. Like it would because I think there's a lot of value in this story for people today.
So I'm glad you brought that up about if Grandpa was here today. I guess this is a really poignant question from my point of view, is why do you think it took so long for these to come to light? This journal.
To be blunt on this, I think it's just because it's so hard to translate. Like, it was passed from our uncle. So out of the Netherlands, it was given to our uncle and aunt. And all they did was have basically a book with a whole bunch of Dutch in it, right? Like handwritten Dutch that, from what I understand, his sister wrote down from the original books. So transcribed it from original notebooks that were in the Netherlands.
Okay, so I guess you don't. I'm not understanding my question.
Sorry.
So my question is why did we not know any of this until he was passed away? So if we had it when he was alive, maybe somebody could have sat down, to your point, and said, "Hey, let's walk through this. What is this about, Grandpa?"
Maybe he didn't want to talk about it. Maybe he didn't want to relive it. That could be very true. Now, knowing what I know about my grandfather, I don't know if that's completely true, because our grandfather was a very curious man also, and he did love his history, and he was into history. He understood things. Like, he was good at that. Like we said at the beginning, he was an avid reader, right? So when you're an avid reader of multiple different genres, from his favorite detective book to a historical book, he would read them all, a philosophy, religion, all of them, right? And that's probably where I get that a little bit too, I'm assuming. So I think in one way, maybe it's because he didn't want to talk about it and put it in the past. But then there's also a piece of me too, is, life gets in the way as those memories fade, right? Where we're in living our lives, we're putting those things in the past, right? And we're looking forward to the future. So I'm assuming that's why, because they were always there. We just didn't know the right questions to ask.
Not in Canada. They were in Holland, yeah?
Correct. And our grandparents went back to the Netherlands quite a few times. So, and I'm personally looking forward to, so I'm going to go to the Netherlands in September. So I'm going to Groningen. So I'm going to spend a couple of days in Amsterdam, and then I'm going to Groningen in September. So I'm going to see the market. I'm going to see where he lived, the farms around there. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing that and just kind of experiencing the spot.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So you're saying that one of the things that you put yourself in his shoes, but was there certain things that kind of,
and there's no way I can.
Right. But I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. There's really no way to actually experience it, and hopefully we never do, or our families never do experience that, because that is true horror, what he went through. But was there anything in the podcast that you went, oh wow, that's kind of cool, or geez, I didn't know that, or hey, that's something I didn't even consider? Were you, again, we'll go back to the beginning, I didn't know how this was going to turn out. I didn't know whether he was going to be one of the people that were part of the Nazis, or part of, was pro-Nazi. I didn't know. And then, but as we go through, it's very obvious that he's part of the resistance. What was some of the things that kind of jumped out at you after listening to the podcast?
Well, what I found very interesting that you've revealed and that you're kind of unraveling right now is being part of the resistance kind of surprises me, but when I really think about it, maybe not. Because of how he was affiliated with the Christian Reformed Church, he was involved. He was a very religious man, as we know, and he I guess how you're breaking it down, that these words, it's all code, right? Like you said, and we're not sure so far, but you're getting there as to what they exactly mean, right? Because you've done that research back and forth. And that to me was surprising, because I'm like, that makes a ton of sense. That you wouldn't just go, hey, I'm in hiding in the closet. You would never put that. You would
And then
say,
put the specific names of these people.
exactly. You wouldn't do that. Like the Wind Talkers, back the Navajos, right? When they were doing that in World War II.
Oh yeah, it's an incredible story too. That is a super incredible story. Well, one of the things that obviously I'm already further ahead of you in the translations and doing
Right.
the work, over 2 years worth of work. But I'm going to say, like, right now, after episode 5, we have evidence. Like, there is evidence. And you'll even see more evidence as we get going. But one of the big things was this Group 2000 was part of the LO, or the LO was part of the Group 2000. And we didn't understand until you start digging into some of this history of how they were interconnected and what they actually did. The moving of people, making documents, basically using a form of communication. So I'm going to do a little teaser here.
Okay, hey folks, here you go. Here's a teaser for the next one. No, that's good.
Is these words that he wrote down were passed along for a specific reason. So these people know the location. These people know the target. These people know how it's going to be done. And then they all intertwine with each other and send all that information into one spot so that if any one of those groups get caught or taken, they only have a piece of the puzzle, right? So I have evidence that our grandfather was part of that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that Group 2000 and LO. So it's I'm excited about it, and it's an incredible turn of events, because one of the most frustrating things about this whole thing was not just the translation, but to understand what was being said. Because there's sections of this that are like really boring. It's like, did this, spun that, did this, and then all of a sudden there will be a sentence like three lines long talking about certain people, what's going to happen next or where to go, and who I need to be silent with. Like, you can start to see the pattern, and that was kind of my big ta-da. It's like, wow, this is more than just someone writing down some stuff.
Right. And to me, the Group 2000, which I've done a little bit of reading on as well, it's quite exciting that it's been revealed that this group was so connected to what branch of religion Grandpa was part of.
Exactly.
And to me, I was like, to your point, the aha moment of how can he not be? How can he not be connected to this group, or let alone have knowledge? And to what extent, we don't know fully, but I think you're getting there, right?
Well, we do.
How deep.
We do.
Well, I don't at this point,
Yeah.
right? Like how deeply involved this gets for him, right?
So
and I think I'm excited to find out.
So the church is a big part of this, because one of the things that the Nazis did, so I guess in the Netherlands, how church was done was quite a bit different than it is done today. It was more done as a community thing. So it wasn't like, as pompous as it would be today. It was more of a communal thing, right? And they would have boys clubs, right? And where people came together, they would do crokinole, they would do games, they would, do singing or choirs and stuff like that. And the Nazis shut that stuff down. They tried to infiltrate it by putting in spies or people that were part of, that were pro-Nazi, and they would put people in there. But they were finding out that these groups of boys would be able to sniff that out immediately, right? Like, and if you read through the history, you can see how that kind of happened. So then they shut it all down. They didn't allow young men to meet even for churches. So the connection started is, hey, all these church meetings were like literally shut down. Nobody was doing these anymore. But then suddenly in 1943, our grandfather's talking about them constantly. And then I started to see, so where the real light bulb moment came is those passages in episode 5 actually meant something. They weren't just Bible verses. They were Bible verses telling others in the group on what was coming next or what to do next. So, and I found these archives in the University of Groningen and in the University of Amsterdam, and literally it jumped right off the page. These Bible verses meant this. And it was just like, OMG.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
This is real. I had my suspicions, but this is real. So yeah, it was pretty exciting.
That is incredible. See, and all of these things, when you put them all together, did I even know that man really?
Yeah, it's like, wow, he was like
very industrious.
very,
not only what he showed us, but also what was going on in his. Yeah,
he was a survivor.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But here's the thing. This is what I love most. I know I'm jumping ahead here, and something that I hope I see in today's world a little bit more is that yes, he was a survivor, but at no point can I come to the conclusion that he put his morality, his love of humanity aside to survive. So he wasn't one of these people who would do anything to survive. You could tell in the way that he was writing, and you could tell that he was doing this with a purpose. You could tell that he believed in humanity. He believed in democracy. He believed in the liberalization of the world. Like you could tell, because he was willing to sacrifice at any minute. He could have been killed or picked up at any moment. He was willing to do that and resist and not just sit on the sidelines and just hide from the world. That's not what he did. He literally stepped forward and fought for his country, and liberalization just did it in the way that he was able to do in those circumstances. And I get a lot of inspiration from that.
It's interesting that you're right. He was quite liberal, comparatively speaking, to a lot of people that we ever grew up with, right?
Yes.
But I think he was still pretty conservative on a lot of things. And I like that he had forward thinking. And I like that he had an open mind to a lot of things that a lot of people did not, where it was shut down. And to your point, I think that in our world is important, that we have an open-mindedness when it comes to humanity. And I appreciate that about him, because I told you a story off camera a long time ago when we were just chatting and stuff before going on air here. And that still rings true for me today, is that it was an aha moment for me, going, wow, I did not see that coming out of your mouth. I was surprised.
And
maybe it was.
And let's have the
you want
audience
to touch on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell the story.
Fill them in.
Yeah. Tell the story. Fill them in, because they're going, what the hell is he talking about?
And maybe I was teasing it a little bit, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I think it's important to just show what I mean by that. So David and I were talking about my grandfather. We would have a group sermon with 3 different congregations. We would go to the Knox Presbyterian Church. So we would have Maranatha Christian Reformed Church, Covenant Christian Reformed Church, and we would have Knox Presbyterian Church. All meet at the Knox Presbyterian Church. And the Presbyterian Church is a lot more liberal on certain things than as we know, our Christian CRC. Yeah, the Christian Reformed Church. So they had brought on a female pastor, and there was a lot of uproar within the two congregations of the CRC, the Christian Reformed Church. And I remember it kind of tore at Grandpa a little bit that, he didn't want to get involved in this. Well, I'm not going because of this, and this, and I will not listen to a female preach the word of God, blah, blah, blah.
He wasn't part of the cultural BS, we'll call it.
Right. It's a type of sexist bias, right?
Yeah, it is.
And he didn't
Absolutely.
want to be part of that. He wanted to just go to church, not deal with that kind of politic crap, and just listen to the word of God because that's what he cared about. So anyways, that brings me to, I had asked him a question on the way to church. I said, Grandpa, because he was talking about it with Grandma a little bit on the way to church on that particular day. And I asked him, I said, Grandpa, what do you feel about that? I mean, obviously we're going, so I mean, what are your thoughts? Like, are you indifferent? Are you mad about it kind of thing? Or are you just going because whatever, I'm not going to get involved? And he actually said, and these are his words, it doesn't matter to me who speaks the words as long as it is the word of God. It doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man, as long as it is the word of God. And that's what's important.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, and that's where he left it. Boom. That was it.
Right. And at that time, it was a big deal. It was a big
huge
deal. Yeah, it was a big
huge deal. Still to this day.
Well, in the CRC world, so one of the things that and we were talking off camera about that before, is that the Netherlands was actually one of the most liberal countries at that time. They believed in workers' rights. Women were able to vote for years and years before many other countries. And there was a very good cohesion between the Catholics, the Calvinists, the Jewish, right, and non-denominational and all that kind of stuff in the Netherlands, which is a lot like Canada today. But one of the things that I did find out that was a little disturbing to me is that there were definitely two very divisive views in the Christian Reformed Church and the Dutch Reformed Church.
Still is today.
Oh yeah, there's ones that are like totally inhuman, and then there's other ones that embrace humanity. And in the Netherlands at the time, it was the same thing. There were the ones that were pro-Nazi and believed that this was the right way to go, right? And then there's the other ones that were like, yeah, no, this is bad. This is bad all the way around. This is inhumane. And the ones that were pro-Nazi and again, I go back to that of why I think my grandfather was in the resistance, is he cared about humanity. He loved humanity, right? And he saw how this religion actually probably turned bad. They weren't bad people. It was their religion kind of helped them get into it, right? Like how they justified being cruel to humans, right? And it's still, the CRC, I believe, is still the same way. Like there's all these little offshoots of, authoritarianism is the way to go versus liberalization, equality, right?
Yep. Because again, to your point, we see it still today. Like there is a sad separation from the really strict no females in
ego-driven
leadership, no leadership roles, where there's other ones that are like what Grandpa thought. It doesn't matter. They can just be just as God-fearing as a man. To him, it was like, I don't get it, but I'm not going to get involved in that because this is what I believe and this is how I feel. And then having that conversation with you earlier, it's very true to what your point is, right? Is that the Dutch people were very progressive in a lot of things.
They were.
So I'd like to ask you another question.
Sure.
Why did you feel it was so important to spend the said 2 years untangling this amazing story? What brought you to think that, hey, I'm going to start digging?
I love history. I do love history. I wasn't like a big into necessarily World War II history, I was more into the history of the origins of man, origins of culture, that type of thing, like the history of nation making and stuff like that. Biblical history I loved, and understanding how the Bible came to be, like how everything kind of came together from the Roman Catholics to, modern day Scientology, right? Like how all those things kind of happen. So history is important to me. I love history. I think we can learn a lot from history. And I have to give a shout out to Mr. Josie, my history teacher, because it was him that probably ignited this whole thing with history. So when I first started, it was just kind of interesting, right? Because like I said in the first podcast, it was like a light bulb. It was like I was reading this article out of the New York Times that this person was able to translate. I had taken that book to multiple people to try to get it translated, but it's not easy to do. And you have to go line by line and you have to cross-reference. It's handwriting, so it's not always very clear. So it was really hard to do that. But so by using technology, I love technology. So it was kind of interesting just to see what I could get out of it. And then I started reading, and like you said, something happened. It was emotional because I started to read the life that was going on at that moment. And because I knew some of our history and how we grew up, it just hit me hard. Like you said, it became emotional. It was something that I couldn't believe I was hearing our grandfather's voice come through, right? Like I said, I was really disappointed in some of our family. I will be honest, it hurt because I thought this would be something that would be cool to bring together, right? That I could learn from them, from what they understand, like how we're sharing today, is to actually share some of those stories or some of those little hints or understanding, because there are little tidbits that you and I heard, from what he thought of people not understanding what happened in the Second World War, that it was going to happen again. Politics. He taught me politics, right? And just how all that kind of stuff came about. So that was the other part, was hearing his voice. But then I thought, hey, this is a great family thing that we can be proud of and understand. We die twice in our existence. Once when they put us in the grave, and the second time is the last time they say your name. And it just brought his name back out. So this is the fourth reason, is I started to realize what this was. The more I researched, I always love to learn. I'm a curious human being. I want to learn more. I want to know more today than I knew yesterday. So when it really started to get to understand that he was part of the resistance, that was like gasoline to the fire. And it just, I spent hours at night just reading archives, reading history, other people's interviews, listening. There's on YouTube, there are actual interviews of people that lived through this and hearing what happened to them. And it's just incredible. So does that answer the question? It's a long answer, but that's why. And there is a satisfaction that I get that people are listening to this. And I think it's important because our history can stop us from making a huge mistake going forward. And the more people that understand this stuff won't make that mistake again. So I guess it's all those reasons.
So to break it down is curiosity.
Yeah, obviously.
Turns into a labor of love. It's now, for Grandpa, it's his, I guess his legacy, a good, perfect legacy, and our family history as to how we came about. And now it's 100% for yourself. It's molding it all together to find out the complete answer as to where and why and how Grandpa was involved in this whole thing, so that we can peel back the history of this particular 10 years in time that kind of was lost until now, right? And I think that's what history is all about, is peeling back that onion to find all the layers, to find that beautiful core in the middle, right? That explains it all and why. And then, no, that's great. That's perfect. I think it's
and
meant
I
to
think
be.
and I think it's I think it's a good lesson. I hope people listen to this and they understand how fragile we really all are and how important a society can be, right? Because it told us what happened there. We have the roadmap, right? So we know what we shouldn't do so that doesn't happen again. Could be, yeah, who knows? And that's why life is so important, and that's why we should be taking care of of everybody, no matter what. We're all living on this planet for our happiness, to be the best people that we can be. You know
Well,
what I mean? So
and to kind of elaborate on that, where I come from, and I've had to tell my own children this, right? Is David Visser is the rarest of the rarest creature in this whole entire cosmos. There's only one of you, and there will be only one of you.
yeah.
And so when we indiscriminately start killing people, like what happened in World War II, what grandfather witnessed and what grandfather went through.
Right. And also on the other side of that, and those are the things worth fighting for.
100%.
And we should fight for them. We should
That's
fight
right.
for them like crazy, because the next generation, we've had 80 years or almost 100 years of relative peace, growth. Science has gone, like, we've learned so much about the universe, about medicine. We've saved literally millions of lives with all this stuff that we've learned, and we can't turn back the clock. We got to stop trying to go backwards. We got to keep progressing. We got to try to make ourselves better and make the people around us better. And we got to fight those who want to drag us back.
And if we regress, we have what we're dealing with in this whole journey that you're taking. This is what happens.
This is exactly what happened, right? Is they try to take us back.
That's right.
Right? So,
and the world wanted to progress.
Yep.
But the Germans did not.
Yep. Well, they wanted to be the big guys on the playground. They wanted their way to be the way. Kind of like what we're seeing today in Russia and the United States, right? Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
That's right. A funny thing is, I had a great conversation with one of my daughters a while ago about communism came up. It's funny that we had this conversation. She said to me, "Hey, Dad, what's your thought about communism?" Because they were learning about some stuff in history about it. This was last year. And she said, in theory, right, from what we were learning, is that in theory, it's a great thing. But in principle, if we weren't humans and we weren't emotional people and we weren't greedy, it would be wonderful, right? Oh yeah, the utopian, blah, 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 everybody's equal, blah, blah, blah. But I said, but when you bring in the human emotion and you bring in humans, we screw it up, and there's no way it could ever work. Never. And its history has shown that over and over and over again.
So, and this is the thing, like with almost any ism, whether it's communism, capitalism, socialism, all that kind of stuff.
Yep, all of them.
This is why we're having so much problems right now, is that people are going into their own encampment and not listening to everything. What makes Canada amazing and the European Union amazing is that we're not 100% capitalists. We're not 100% communist. We're not 100% socialist. It's just like anything in life. You take the best of each piece and you put it together and you make it work for your community, your society, your province, your country, your world, right? And if we do it that way, we would have another 100 years of positive growth and just be better. We'd just be better humans.
And isn't that amazing?
Well, Danny, we got to do this again. This
100%.
this is an amazing conversation. Leave us with something that maybe you're hoping to hear, or what you might think you might hear. What's your speculation coming up? From out of all the episodes, did you have a favorite episode, and why?
Okay, so the first thing is what I hope to hear is that our grandfather, who already in our hearts, and I hope I can speak for you, is a hero. He was a hero to me.
For me on that.
He was a hero to me for just raising me to be the man that I am today. I know I'm not perfect and never will be, but anyways, the man that raised me taught me so many things that I didn't realize until I became a parent, and reflected back on a lot of things. So for me, I hope he becomes a war hero. And I know that everybody can translate that in their own way. And I don't mean like a hero, like he saved the world, but his little part of the world helped save. And that to me would just even solidify it even more. See, he not only was a hero just for me personally and how he raised me, but he was also a hero to his own people, his own country, his own city, his own town, his own neighborhood, even if it was his neighborhood.
It was his own neighborhood.
Right. And I hope that comes out in spades and it says, there was worth all this 2 years of hard work. And you guys, and I mean by that, by our family, that, hey, look at what we've uncovered in this whole thing. That, yeah, he was an incredible man even before we fully realized how incredible he was. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think you're going to be, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, don't wreck it.
I won't wreck it.
To answer that final thing is what am I, my favorite episode so far is the last one, because and it's 100% honest, it's fresh in my brain. 2, it is the most interesting so far.
Okay. And what do you think is the most interesting? Like, is it
finding out that we're that close to knowing 1,000% that he was part of this group 2000.
Yeah.
And that to me is like, moment of,
yes,
holy shit, excuse my language, but this is effing cool. Like, yes. Cool.
That was my aha moment. Now, I knew about this a few months ago already. Well, it's about 5, 6, and it was hard not to reveal it.
Jump right to that.
Well, yeah. And yeah, it's funny that you say that. I wanted to jump right to that. Like I did. Yep. I just want to.
But there's so much in between first.
I know. It was just like if you talk to my wife, she knows that I was on, like, you won't believe what I found out today. Oh my goodness. I was up last night till 12 o'clock reading this periodical in this archive, and I just realized XYZ, and oh my God, I found this and I found that. But yeah, it's been an incredible journey. And Danny, thank you very much for being part of it. Love you, brother.
No problem. Love you too, brother.
All right. Any last words?
No, I guess just keep up that amazing work. And if there's anything you need me to do, or you just want to do more of these,
I absolutely do want to do more of these.
Okay, I'm in.
And just elbows up.
When and how.
Elbows up.
Yeah, baby.
All right. Thank you so much.
Elbows up,
bud. Up. All right. Love you, brother. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Day's Adventure. And we're going to do this again soon.
Okay. Sounds good.
That's it for this episode of the Day's Adventure. Remember, stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop chasing the next great adventure. The world is full of wonders, and your next journey is just one episode away. To keep the adventure alive, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video versions and exclusive behind-the-scenes content. Want more? Hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll never miss the next thrilling episode. The world's waiting. See you next time on the Day's Adventure.